Yeah. Boker Tov. Today's daf is Daf Zayin and Gitin, as we learn for Ilu Neshama of Avram ben Yosef and Refor Shlema LaAvner ben Narkis and Refor Shlema to Elazar ben Reuben Yosef ben Chaim Michal. We're about 8 lines down on the page on Yud Zayin Amud Aleph. Echad Fani Nechtav v'Shnayim Fani Nechtam kosher. That was the last case in the Mishnah. If 2 people signed on it, 2 people agree that they both testify that they saw the signature, that was kosher. Everybody says that's kosher. Everybody says, even the Tanakama, not just Rabbi Yehuda, but even the Tanakama. The last line in the Mishnah was Echad Fani Nechtav v'Shnayim Fani Nechtam kosher. What's the case? Says the Gemara, Amar Rami said Rabbi Yochanan, Lo shelo sheged yosem tachas yad a ksiva. If the shliach over here is the one who says I befanei nichtav, and so therefore, and then you have 2 people on the signatures, the nasu kishnayim alzeh shnayim alzeh. So you have 2 people effectively on the ksiva and 2 people on the chatima, because 2 people said yeah befanei nechtam. And then you have 2 people on the ksiva effectively. Why? Because the shliach is believed like 2. That was the takana of the chachamim. Then it's okay. Again, what happened over here? 1 person says b'fanei nechtam, and 2 people said b'fanei nechtam. Who brought the get? So the takana chacham was the person who's to bring get is supposed to say b'fanei nechtam, and he's believed like 2. So over here, if the person who brought the get says b'fanei nechtam, that's like 2. And there are actually 2 people who said b'fanei nechtam. They didn't bring the get. They weren't holding on to it, but they said we saw it. Then you got 2 on the ksiva, 2 on the chesima. That's kosher. Avol mitachas yadei chesima. But let's say the people who say the shlichim who brought the get, even though the 2 people who signed, who confirmed the signatures, they were the ones who brought it. Then it's no good. Well, avol mitachas yadei edei chesima. If the edei chesima, the ones who confirmed the 2 signatures, they are the ones who brought the get. Then it's puzzled. You know why? Because even though there's 2 people on the chatima, there's only 1 person on the ketiva, right? There's only 1 person on the ketiva, and he wasn't the shliach.
He said that if 2 people break it, they don't have to say anything.
Oh, very good, very good. So here, l'chara, you see the other way around, right? Isn't that the other way around? That's what we said. Very good. Al maksaver. So this shita holds shnayim sheviu dirasiyam strichas, because he said if 2 people brought the get and they confirmed the signatures, and somebody else who didn't bring the get said, I saw the writing, well, he's only believed like 1, and it's no good, even though there's 2 people who brought the get who don't have to say anything. We said, yes, they don't have to say anything according to that shita, but this holds otherwise. Should be a get. There's 2 people brought get. They have to say, and they didn't, because the 2 people who brought the get over here just confirmed the signatures, but not the nichtav, then it would be good. Amalei Ravasi, so Ravasi said to Rav Ami. Rav Ami was on the sense name Rav Yochanan. Now this is apparently Avram correct. This it goes against what we said yesterday. Went like the second sheet yesterday, but not the way it came out. We're not done. Amalei Ravasi. So Ravasi said only out the ratio. What about the case prior? It doesn't mean the very first case in the Mishnah. It means the case prior to that Mishnah. 2 people said what b'fanei nechtam, and 1 said b'fanei nechtam. Puzzle and Rav Yehuda Machshir. Are you telling me that even if 2 people brought the get, even if 2 people brought the get, you're going to say still that the Chacham say it's puzzle? If what? If 2 people said b'fanei nechtav and 1 person b'fanei nechtav and 1 person said b'fanei nechtam, even if 2 people brought the get, that's right. That's right. I hold even if 2 people bring the get, they have to say b'fanei nechtam. And if they didn't, it's puzzle. Why is it good in the Mishnah over here? In the Mishnah over here, where 1 person said b'fanei nechtav and 2 people said b'fanei nechtam, because the person who brought the get said b'fanei nechtav, and that's like 2. And then 2 other people confirmed the signature. So you have 2 on the ksiva, 2 on the chesima. But that's why it's okay. But otherwise, if 2 people bring a get and don't say b'fanei nechtam, it would be puzzle according to this. That's what Rav Ami said the first time. That's what he heard the name of Yochanan. Zimnan ashkei dias v'kamar. Later on, he heard that the same Rav Ami said in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, even if the 2 people bringing the get are the ones who confirmed the signatures, meaning the one who says b'fanei nechtav did not bring the get, and therefore it should be good. It's kosher. It's the kosher anyway. Why? Because, like we said yesterday, Avram, you don't have to say if you're two people brought the get, because they are the Adam. Ravasi said to Ravami when he heard this, Elamiata Resha, the first case, the case prior, the same case immediately prior to the last case in the Mishnah, the second to the last sheet. That's puzzle. Rabbi Yehuda Machshir. Why is it puzzle? The ain get yosem tachsishtem, because the two people aren't bringing the get. In other words, one person brought the get. And he said, let's say one of them said, the person who brought the get said maybe b'fanei nechtam, and that's only one. Or he was the one who said he was one of the ones who said b'fanei nechtav, and you don't have it kosher. They engage with Hashem. I'll get yes, but if two people would have brought the get was only brought by one person. One person saying b'fanei nechtav doesn't help for b'fanei nechtam. The person said b'fanei nechtam didn't bring the get, but if the get would be brought by two people, again, you need two people. In a normal situation, if you have two Adam who can confirm the get, that's as good as anything. We said yesterday, if there's no get here at all, two people said, we saw Ruvain divorce Leah properly in front of a court, whatever, that's all you need, even if there's no get here now. Two people is better than anything. So if two people bring the get, they don't have to say then get yes. There's a special dispensation. The Chum said it normally. Who brings the get? One person said you don't have two shlichim. You have one person. So one person, the Chum said, you know what? He must say b'fanei nechtam. Why? Because that'll save problems. Number one, we'll investigate for lishma. Number two, you may not find Adam around here to confirm the signatures. Remember, you don't have to say b'fanei nechtam if you're in the same country, the same locality, the same Israel, or the same New York, because you could always find Adam to confirm it. It's only if you can't find Adam to confirm it, you're in a situation where you probably won't find Adam to confirm it. So the rabbi said, that's like two people. That's good enough. But if actually two people brought the get, you don't have to say anything. Then he says, okay, Hashem, machshir, that's right. The Rabbana would be machshir in that case, like we said yesterday at the first opinion, the first and the last opinion. So Ravasi said, but another time you told me the other way around. Like we said at the beginning of the Shiur today, right? Now you admit that if two people bring the get, you don't have to say anything. But before you told me, some other time I met you last year, and you said if two people bring it, they still said fanechtam. Amalei yated hi shelo tamud. This is a peg that is not moved, should not be moved, right? It shouldn't be moved at all. It's you shouldn't shake it loose. What I'm telling you now is the final the final one. What I said before, I recant that now. Lashon Achron Zemes, the last thing we heard, that's the truth, that should not be moved away. Now we come to a famous issue. Minat Torah, you have to write a get, right? It says V'sukasel v'sefer krisis. So we call it, the Torah doesn't call it a get. A get is a strange lashon. A get is like an Aramaic term meaning a document, right? It could be a get shichur, it could be a get mecher, it could be a get halva. It's really like a shtar. We use the word get, as we said before. Remember that the Gimel and the Tet are separated. You never find Gimel and Tet together, the word Gimel and Tet together in Tanakh. You never find those two letters together because it shows that they're separated. Fine. And we say that you write a get with 12 lines, Gematria, Gimel, Tet, all that stuff. That's all nice and dandy. What are the rules about the get? We know it has to be written in the Shema, right? You can't find a get in the a boilerplate like at the drugstore where they have all the names written out in advance, Susie's getting divorced from Jimmy and all that. You can't do that and just sign it and give it to her. It has to be written for that person and those two people, right? And you have to have the date line, meaning the place that it was written, right? You have to have all that. They usually, over the years, the Chum said you have to write it at a place. They usually give Gittin only in a place where there's a river, so you can identify the city. Because in those days, cities were basically all based on rivers. The major cities in the world are all near rivers, near water, so that they could. That was the only way to get transportation, to move goods, etc., etc. Fine. What about the date? Does the Torah say you have to have a date in a get? No, the Torah doesn't say anything about a date. However, the rabbis instituted you should have a date in a get. Why? So we're going to see two reasons. Two reasons are brought down. We're going to explain that. So the date is important. It's not indispensable, because if you had a get without a date and he gave it to her, it'd still be kosher. She's still divorced and she can get remarried on that. But the chachil, you need a get, and it'll see why. So the Mishnah says like this. Let's say the get, and again, let's say let's say you wrote a get that day and it was signed that day, right? You wrote the get, Adam signed on it. Remember, the key is we hold main Adam are the Adam that are there at the handing over of the get. She's not divorced, based on a judge saying you're divorced or some document being signed. It's divorced when it's handed to her. It's not handed to her, she's not divorced, or handed to her property. It has to be given over into her possession. Otherwise, she's not divorced, no matter how many people signed on it, written lishma and all that. Okay, but it's got to look kosher. So let's say it was written during the day and signed during the day, or that night it was written at night and signed at night. Certain things are not done at night. We don't do judgments, right? Court cases are not done at night. But you could write a get at night and sign it at night, or let's say you wrote it at night and signed it the next morning. Same day, we know that the day follows the night in Jewish law, right? So the day follows the night. That's all the same day. If you wrote it at night and signed it, no problem. But if you wrote it during the day and you signed it at night, that's no good. Why? Because it looks like it's what we call a get mukdam. Let's just take a simple example and say today is Yud Gimel. Today's Yud Gimel Sivan. Now let's say it was written yesterday, Yud Bey Sivan, and it was signed last night on Yud Gimel Sivan. Okay, that's no good. Why? Because it looks like she was divorced yesterday. Really, she's not being divorced till today. You couldn't give it to her until it's signed, right? You have to have Adam signed again. Again, Rav Lezer holds that if you didn't have Adam signed on, you had Adam Masir, that's good enough, but we still put Adam on there. So if it was signed at night and written during the day, that would be puzzle. L'chadchila, that's puzzle. Why? Because it looks like it was written yesterday. So what's the difference when it was written? Don't we go by when it was handed over anyway? Maybe you didn't give it to her till next week. She left town. She went away for Shabbos, right? It was written yesterday, signed last night, and he's not giving it till next week anyway. What's the difference? So we'll see why you need it, why this man is important. Okay. Rav Shimon says it's kosher anyway, because he says, you know what? Rav Shimon Omer called gitin shenichtav b'yom nechbala. All gitin here he means all shtaros. And Rashi says shel mecher matana halva, whether it's a bill of sale, a gift. He can gift something also. I'm going to give you a piece of land. I write a shtar and say, I hereby give you this piece of land. I give it to you the shtar. That's also a shtar. All those things that are written a day and signed tonight, that's no good. You know why? Because the question is, when did you own it? Let's say you sold the piece of land in between. I'll give you an example. This is the same day and the next night. Let's say it was a couple days apart to make a simple case, right? Let's say it was written on Wednesday, and it wasn't signed until Thursday, or signed till Friday, let's say. Let's give it a simple example. It was signed till Friday. On Thursday, the guy sold it to somebody else, right? But now this guy who hasn't written, who received it, says, oh, I have it on Wednesday. Look at the date. Date's Wednesday. Yeah, but it wasn't signed till Friday. So that doesn't look good, right? Doesn't look good. And a fashla can come out. Because the guy who received it, let's say you gave a gift to somebody on Wednesday. Here I'm writing, you see it's written Wednesday's date, but it wasn't signed till Friday. In between, I sold it to somebody else on Thursday, or I gave it to somebody else on Thursday, right? So who's entitled to it? The guy who got it on Thursday. But the guy who got it on Friday, the giftee, right? He's going to say, look, I got it on Wednesday, and he's going to take it away, so you're going to have problems. So therefore, Shimon says, except for Gitin Nashim. Because it's not really that important. It's not really that important. A get Isha, we don't care if it was written on one day, signed on another day. It's not important. Why not? We're going to see now why. Itmar. The matikness on the Gittin. Again, the Chacham, as they said, Torah, you didn't need this man in the get. The rabbi said, put us man in the get. Rabbi Yochanan says a famous machlokes. Rabbi Yochanan says, if he died in between, correct. If he died in,
it makes a difference today because it wasn't ever given over.
Right. Yeah, but in case where he died in between, he wouldn't be giving it because he's dead, right? Or a shliach from dead. In a case like that, you're right. We're talking about where a guy didn't die, though. But the guy didn't die. In a regular case where a guy didn't die after he wrote the get, maybe she shot him when she saw him about to get the get. She wants it, but she's better off getting divorced because she'll have money. It's not like today where they don't want to get divorced because they want to get the death benefits from the government. But in those days, if he divorced her, at least she'll get the ksuba. If he dies and there's not enough money for the ksuba and the Yorshim take it first, well, the ksuba is really, she'll get the ksuba either way. But whatever it was, let's just, she got angry. Whatever, that's a bad example. Okay, Itmar. Why did the Recham say you have this amount of give? Rabbi Yochanan says, so famous case. Let's say it was a big mitzvah to marry a niece. You can't marry your aunt, but you can marry your niece. In fact, it was a mitzvah to marry a niece, a brother's daughter or a sister's daughter, married a niece. This niece played around, did something wrong. She committed some sexual misconduct. Now, the family comes to him and there's Adam and they saw it and she's about to take her out to be killed, to be adjudicated. So what are you going to do? She said, okay, Rahmanis, he gives her a get with no date on it. And she could say, oh, I was divorced at the time. When I didn't commit adultery, I was divorced. So because of that, Mishum Basa Choso, right? Because in case, normally you'd say if she committed adultery, take her out, kill her. What? She has to get. He gives her, what happens is this woman committed adultery. And the family said to him, you could say the family could also say, why Basa Choso? He could have Achmanos on any wife, in theory, right? If they're taking her out to be killed. But I want to say it about because Basa Choso, Rov Ban and Dom Lachaya'ain. Most nephews and nieces are comparable to their uncle, right? And not just in looks. People say, oh, he looks like his mother's brother, or he looks like his, not in characteristics, kind of a person he is. So a person's more likely to lie about the husband whose wife now committed adultery is more likely to protect her if it's his niece, because it reflects badly on him. If she is that kind of a unscrupulous kind of a person, maybe he is too. In any case, what happened was she committed adultery. Now he wants to protect her. So he gives her a get now, after the fact, but with no date on it. So when they're about to take her out to kill her, they take her to a court case, he committed adultery, we warned you, etc., etc. He says, oh, I was already divorced at that time. Can't touch me. Understand? So therefore, the Rabbi said you have to have a zman and a get. Mishum Basa Chosa. That's Rabbi Yochanan's reason. Rish Lakish says no. Mishum Peiros is very simple. She's going to want, what's going to happen? He's entitled. He works her product, her land, her mechse mulug. Remember, any land she brought into the marriage, he works it. He gets the Peiros, etc. He's entitled to all that. Once he divorces her, no longer entitled. So if there's no zman in the get, and there was a bumper crop, they got divorced. That summer there was a bumper crop, and she says, wait a minute, those are mine. Those are mine. We were divorced already. Those are mine. You can't touch those. He's entitled to the Paris as long as they're married. But if there's no zman, she'll say, listen, I was divorced already a long time ago. Those are my Paris. So that's Rish Lakish's reason. So two reasons why you need a zman and a get, for the two reasons. Rabbi Yochanan, Rish Lakish. So Rish Lakish, my time, Rabbi Yochanan. Why didn't Rish Lakish give Rabbi Yochanan's reasoning? Because maybe he will protect his adulterous wife with a get with no date on it. So the rabbi said, you better put a date in there. Why didn't Rabbi Yochanan say, Rabbi Yochanan, come on. Tosfos points out, snus is shchich, but snus with Adam and Asra is not so shchich, right? There's a lot of adultery going around, right? We have other cases where we say, so this is why, because why do we say at the beginning of Ksubah? So the Ksubah gets married on Wednesday, so in case he finds Pesach Fasuch, he comes to court the next day. You're making a whole deal about the dates that they have to get married, which, by the way, decreases the number of days, and the caterers can charge more because everybody's looking for Wednesday, right? All that because possibly she committed adultery. Now, adulteries can happen, right? But adultery with Adam and Asra, that you're going to worry about that you're going to kill her and he'll protect her this way, that's not very common. So Rish Lakish doesn't give Rabbi Yochanan's reason for that. Rabbi Yochanan might tell like Rish Lakish. Now listen very carefully. Why did Rabbi Yochanan say like Rish Lakish? He says it makes no difference what date's written on the get. Rabbi Yochanan says, my time along with Rish Lakish says, you're talking about because payros, because what's going to happen? There was a bumper crop that summer. She's going to claim that there was no, that she was divorced before. If there's no date on it, we don't look at the date of the get when it comes in. We look at when it was given. Mishas Nasina. My time alone, even if he writes the get 6-8 months before, he wrote the get. The sofer was in town. He had to write a get. Just I want to have it handy just in case. We'll talk about that case later. But let's say he has the. When is she divorced? Not when you write, not the date on the get. She's divorced. Like I said before, you wrote a get on Wednesday. He signed it on Thursday or Friday. Then you give it to her next week. When is she divorced? When he gave it to her. When he gave it to her, right? You need a get. So Rebecca says you need a zman on a get, because if you have no zman, she can claim that she was divorced, years ago, and when she committed adultery. So she need Adam. You need Adam when as to you have to prove. So here's the thing. If she's in court and they're about to kill her for adultery, she could say, I have a get over here. You prove when you got divorced. Wait, you're trying to kill me. You're trying to kill me, she's saying. You got to prove that when I committed adultery, I was a married woman. I claim I wasn't. Here's a get. Here's my get. I got my get before. She, as an excuse, you can't prove that she really committed adultery as a married woman. But if she wants payros, and she says, listen, what happened? He's got the bumper crop here. She's coming with a claim. She's got the lower hand because they're in his possession. He's working the land. His workers are out there. She says, those are my payros. Go prove it. Go prove it. Well, you got to prove it. You got to prove when you got divorced. We don't care what's written, the date on the get. The get could have been written 3 years ago, and he gave it to her later on. So that's no proof that she was divorced then. She has to prove when she was divorced. So Rabbi Yochanan says the payros aren't going to be an issue. Rabbi Yochanan, my time like Rish Lakish. So Yeshua payros at Shasasina. So Bishlam Rish Lakish, who says that the reason is because of payros. That's why Reb Shimon says it's okay. Why? Reb Shimon says the get's okay because we don't care about. Right, we don't care about, what does that mean? Rav Shimon says, we don't care about the date. You know why we don't care about the date? Rav Shimon's machshir, even if it was written on a different day. What is Rav Shimon's machshir? We need it. Shimon says you need a get, you need a zman on the get, but he says if it was written on the day and signed at night or signed later on, it's okay. What's the concern? What's the concern according to Rish Lakish? Rish Lakish says that the reason is because of payros, right? But Reb Shimon holds that she's entitled to the payros as soon as he wrote the get. She's entitled to get. Take a look at Rashi in the third line, right? Mishamachi machshir Reb Shimon beget mukdam. And that's when the date's written before it was signed. Reb Shimon, as soon as he intends to divorce her, Shuvan he's not entitled payros and Rahilkach emisa lemetrav lekuchos the payros miyom ksiva shapir of the time of Rabbanan Kamfarish. In other words, it says, according to, again, we explained why Reb Shimon doesn't like Rabbi Yochanan because he says it's nusas ashkir. Rabbi Yochanan doesn't like Rish Lakish because he says it doesn't make any difference if the date is if the date's before whatever because he's entitled to the payros until he divorces her. He actually divorces her. So he says Bishlam Rish Lakish, who says the reason is payros mishmachi kamach Reb Shimon. You know why? Because what's the concern? That if it's written, what did Reb Shimon machshir? What did Reb Shimon say is okay? If it was written, let's say on Wednesday and was signed on Friday. What's the concern? What's the concern? That she's going to say, I want the payros from Wednesday, right? Maybe you sold the payros on Thursday or there was a bumper crop in between. So what? If he wrote it on Wednesday, she's entitled to the payros right from that, according to Reb Shimon. You know why? As soon as he decided to divorce her, that's it. He shouldn't touch her payros anymore. As soon as there was a decision made, that's what he says. So Bishlam Mishlakish Mishmachik, that's Reb Shimon's machshir. Rabbi Yochanan, my time Reb Shimon. Rabbi Yochanan, who says that the reason is because of adultery, right? Basachoso, that's why you need a get. That's why you need a zman to get. Why? So that he shouldn't give her a get with no date, and she can claim that she was divorced at the time of adultery. So why would Reb Shimon be machshir that case? Let's you understand, why would Reb Shimon be machshir and say, oh, it's okay if it was written today and signed the next day or later on? Why? Because that's okay. Yeah, but maybe she committed adultery in between, and it's adultery until he gives her the get. But if she says, I have a get that's written early, she looks at the zman of the get. The zman of the get was written, let's say, last week. She committed adultery in between. Now she's going to say, I was divorced then. But she's really not divorced until he gives her the get. So according to Rabbi Yochanan, my time, Reb Shimon's reason to machshir. Why would it be kosher? The zman of the get has to be proper so that it can prove when she was divorced. Almost Rabbi Yochanan, I'll leave it Reb Shimon. Look at me, you're right. I'm not giving Reb Shimon's reasoning. My reason of Shem Yechapal Basachosav, maybe he'll have Rachmanis on his niece and give her an undated get so that she can claim she was divorced, that's according to the Tanakama. That's why if it was written during the day and signed at night, it's so good. If it was signed at a later date than the time that it was written, it's so good because this might happen. He might protect her. I'll leave it. I'm not talking about Rav. I'm talking according to Rabbi Yochanan. I'm speaking. Rabbi Yochanan says I'm speaking not according to Rav Shimon, but according to Rabbanan. Meaning, according to Rabbanan, that's the reason why if it was written one day and signed another day, a later day, that's no good because maybe he will use it to protect her when she committed adultery. But according to Rav Shimon, the reason is peiros. You're right. According to Rav Shimon, the reason is peiros, and that's what Rav Shimon's machshir. We don't care about the peiros because he, according to Rav Shimon, she's Rabbi Yochanan holds that she's entitled to the peiros. Rather, he's entitled to the peiros until they get divorced anyway. So we don't care. But the date's not important.
Someone receives when she receives the gift. That's when she's divorced.
That's when she's divorced. Absolutely. Yeah. What kind of a record would that be?
A signature by witnesses that she received the gift.
No. They don't sign it. They saw it take place, and they can prove they signed it. That's all you need is they have to give it in front of them and they have to be signed.
Some record of this.
They didn't have records like that. There was no registry. There was no. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. That's why you need Adam. Or if there was registry in a court that the judges signed that it took place. We're talking about you didn't have that. It wasn't that. There's no law that you have to have that. If you sign, if a man today goes over to a woman, gives her a get, if he wrote it in his own handwriting, as we'll see, if he wrote his own handwriting and there's no Adam on it, he gives her a get in front of two witnesses, she's divorced. So that's all you need. You're right. If there would be a registry, that would help, but you don't have to have that.
According to Rish Lakish, the reasons don't cancel themselves out.
Which reasons? Rav Lakish doesn't hold Rav Shimon, according to Rav Lakish, doesn't hold that reason at all. He says that's not a reason. That's not a reason. The rabbis wouldn't say put a date in because they might have a case with Adam and Asra, and he says that's lo shchicha. He's not concerned about that at all. We're going to come to Rish Lakish. We haven't explained yet Rish Lakish. So according to Rish Lakish, what's the difference between the Chachamim and Rav Shimon? See, the Gemara just said Bishloma. It's where in the Gemara. According to Rabbi Yochanan, that makes sense. What's machlokes Rabbanan and Rabbanan hold Shem Yichapal Basachoso. That's why you need his man. And again, it's puzzle if it was written, if it was signed on a later date. According to Rabbi Shimon, it's okay if it was signed on a later date. You know why? Why is it okay? Because she's entitled to the peiros anyway from the time that he decided to divorce her. So if he wrote it on Wednesday and signed it next week or a month later or whatever and gave it to her 2 months later, she's entitled to the peiros from that time anyway. So therefore, we don't care about the date. Hi, Nadika ben Rav Shimon, the Rabbanan. That's what I'm saying, Rav Shimon, the Rabbanan. The Rabbanan say it's possible. Rav Shimon says it's not. El Rish Lakish. According to Rish Lakish, that both of them, both Rabbanan and Rav Shimon say the reason is because of peiros, because he says there is no reason of Chemachapa. El Rish Lakish, Ma'ika ben Rav Shimon, Rabbanan. What's the basis of the machlok between Rabbanan and Rav Shimon? Why do the Rabbanan say it's possible and Rav Shimon says it's kosher? It says Peir Mishas Ksivat Shas Chsima Ika Benayu. The difference is that the peiros between the ksiva until the chasima is the difference between them. Says Rashi, take a look at Rashi. According to Rabbanan, she's only entitled to the peiros from the time that it was signed. And according to Reb Shimon, she's entitled to the peiros as soon as it was written, as soon as he wanted to divorce her. So according to Reb Shimon, it's okay if it was written on Wednesday and signed on Friday. She's entitled to the peiros anyway from the time that it started to be written. According to Rabbanan, she's only entitled to the peiros from the time of the signature. That signature, and if the signature was 2 or 3 days later or a month later than the date on the star, that's a problem because she's only entitled to the peiros from the time it was signed, and she's going to try to collect from the time of the ksiva. Therefore, it's possible according to Rabbanan and kosher according to Rav Shimon. Wait a minute. We just said that according to Rabbi Yochanan. This is according. We just explained according to we just find the difference according to Rav Shimon. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, why does Rabbi Yochanan not hold of the reason of peiros? He says the reason is Shem Yechabal Basachoso. Why does he not hold peiros? Because he says the husband gets the peiros anyway until it was given. If you wrote it and signed it even today on Wednesday, and you gave it to her 3 months later, you didn't till when she divorced, you sent it overseas, as we'll see. Right? It took 3 months to get there. and she's divorced only from that time, and the husband's entitled to the payros till then. So the date doesn't have any effect on the payros. What counts is the day that it was given, and either put it in a registry there or have Adam say, we know when it was given to her 3 months later. So, so according to Rabbi Yochanan, when does she get the pay? When is he's entitled to payros until he gives it to her? According to Rish Lakish, no, you're entitled to the payros either from the time of the ksiva or the nesina, depending like the Rabbanan or Rav Shimon. So Reb Shimon, we the other way. From when can she get payros? Rabbi Yochanan mishas ksiva. Rabbi Yochanan says from the time that it was written, not the time it was handed over. Rish Lakish or mishas nesina, the other way around. So we'll switch it around. We'll say no. According to most Rishonim learned that it's this way, that you turn around this latter part. You say, Rabbi Yochanan says from the time that it was given to her, she's only entitled to pay from the time she actually received the get. Therefore, the date's not important. The date that it was written isn't important because what counts is really the date that it was given. And Rish Lakish says no, from the time that it was written. So Rish Lakish also, from the time that it was written, then it makes a difference. It was written, it had to be written and signed on the same day. According to Reb Shimon, we don't care if it was written and signed on the same day because she's entitled to payros as soon as it was written, as soon as he intended to divorce her, as soon as he wrote it, even if it was signed later on, she's entitled to payros from then. And according to the Chachamim, she's only entitled from the time of the Chasima. Amalei Abai Rabbi Yosef. So Abai turned to Rabbi Yosef, his Rebbe. He says, well, I understand something. We learned back, if you look back on Daf Gimel Amud Beis, quickly turn back to Gimel Amud Beis. I hope it's in the same volume for you guys. The Tanan, right in the middle of the page on Gimel Amud Beis, says over there, Tanan, it's referring to a Mishnah later on, but there for sure, if you have an art school, I'm sure it's a different volume. So look in Gimel Amud Beis, it's Tanan. Gimel, right in the middle of the page. Gimel Gittin Psalm. There are 3 Gittin that are puzzle. But if she got married with it, kid's not a mamzer from the second marriage, it's okay. One is that. Let's say he wrote in his own handwriting. He wrote a get himself and gave it, even though there's no Adam on it. He gave it to her, it's kosher. Let's say there's Adam and there's no Zman. What did we just say? There's 2 reasons why the rabbi said you have to have a Zman and a get, either Shemichapa or the Peiros. But he says over here, Yesh lo Adam and there's no Zman. It's puzzle, but if he gave it to her, she's divorced anyway. Or Yesh lo Zman, let's say it has but there's only 1 A. And all the written on it because Eddie Masira Kartes we talked about over there. Now back in our Gemara. So it says over there, one of the what's the middle one? There are 3 Gittin that are puzzled, but if she got married with it, it's kosher. And the kid from the second marriage is not a mamzer. One of them, in this avad kosher, what is that? What's one of them? One of them, there's no zman. We just explained that the rabbi said you have to have a zman again, either because of shemichapa basachoso or because of peiros, according to Rish Lakish, right? According to Rish Lakish or peiros. Rav Shimon says, right, according to Rav Shimon, it's kosher even if the date is wrong, because she's in time. But there's a date in there, right? You don't have no date. If there'd be no date in there, according to Rish Lakish, she'd be able to collect it from whatever. According to Rav Shimon, you collect it from whatever. She could say, I got divorced, 5 years ago. I'm entitled to all the fruits from the last 5 years. So you have a zman in there, right? So Rish Lakish says, again, Rav Shimon says it's kosher, even if it was written, you need a date, but it was okay if it was signed on one day and given on another day, that's okay according to Rav Shimon, because you look at the date of the writing, we don't care about the signature. But here's a different problem. It says, even if there's no date. So what did the Chum help with their takana that say you have to have a zman and a get? It's kosher anyway, even if there's no zman. Even if there's no zman, he gave her a get with no date on it. It's kosher. She's divorced. Minat Torah. So what did the Chum help with the takana? She can't get married with that. Meaning, Rashi explains, everybody knows you have to zman again. You go to a sofer today. You go to a rabbi's today. You go to the court, and I want to get. By the way, don't put it. Leave it undated. You mind leaving it undated? They're gonna say, "What are you kidding? You have to have a zman again." The sofer, the rabbis, everybody knows that. They know you have to have a get. Keeping the hachiu, boy, lift up get below zman. Or he'll sell the payros and say he'll say he gave it to her at a later date. So he's not low cost place still for a dayan below chas milenim. Good signatures. Normal people who are kosher Jews will not sign on such a document to say where's the date. Right? There's a date. Like anything else, if you go to sell your property today or do any important transaction, there's got to be a date on there. What do you mean there's no date? You'll say who knows when it took place. You have to have a date. So it helps l'chadchila. Okay, so that they won't. It'll help, even though it's okay, even if there was no date. She's divorced. but they're not going to write a get without a divorce, without a date. Okay, so let's say they wrote a date, Gazilis Mandi Day, what happens? Okay, there's a date on it, he dates on the first line, he cuts that off, he cut it off properly, and gives it to her. What are you going to do there? No, right? You're not worried about Rav Meir. Rashi says because it's obvious. It's obvious. The mother Chashin Rav Meir kazeh shu nikar v'nigla lo avida inish davida lo v'chashu rabban. I'm not worried about a case where the guy's going to take a scissors and cut off the day. That's so obviously wrong that you're not going to make it takana for that. Okay, fine. Now when it says the date, what date do we use? That particular day. Let's say I say this took place in the month of Nisan. That's a date, right? When did this take place? In the month of Nisan. Okay, it took place in the month of Nisan in this year. That's a day too. Doesn't have to be specific that day. So let's say Kasubo Shavur. Let's say you didn't even have the month. You had the 7-year cycle in the Yovel. This was the 6th Shemitah, and during the 6th Shemitah, during the 7-year cycle of this Yovel. That's a date. Kasubo Shavur or Shani wrote the year. Tafshin Pei Gimel. Chodesh, I wrote Nisan, the Sivan, the day, the month. Shabbos, he wrote which week it was. What would you say there? Amalei kosher. There's a date. He didn't say you have to specify. The Chacham say you have to put a zman in it. Today, things are time stamped. You put it in the court, they have a time stamp on it, right? It's got to have the minutes and the seconds, right? So who says that's a date? Is if I say today is Yud Gimel Sivan, is that a date? Well, I didn't tell you what time it was, right? So what goes into a date? You could have it down to the second. She says they're all kosher. So what does a chacham help for the kind? If I say it took place in this 7-year cycle, what does that help? She could have committed adultery sometime before you were them. So Hanul Shmuel the Kamel, the best way it helps for the month after, for the time afterwards. The one before and the one after. Like the one before and the one after. And Rashi says, if it'll at least help that if she commits adultery after that 7-year cycle, right? You wrote the 7-year cycle out of the 7 years in the Yovel, out of the 7 cycles in the Yovel. So it helps that if she commits adultery afterwards, at least it'll catch her there. But you're right, it won't catch her all the way through. It won't be perfect. In the case of Peiros, if he sells the Peiros now after he gave her the get, she can collect it from there. So it'll help for that. Because if you say that's no good, that's not a good enough date, that's not a specific date. What about the date? Yom Gufe. If let's say you wrote it and signed it that day. Do you know if it's in the morning or the afternoon? Right? He wrote her a get. Let's say a proper date. Yud Gimel Sivan. You wrote it and you signed it that day. Then another guy comes along and says, wait a minute, I bought the payros from him on Yud Gimel Sivan. Well, which one took place first? If it's not time stamped, you don't know which one's first. You could have 2 things written on the same day, right? You don't know which ones, right? That's why when you sell property or you buy property, the guy has a azara, the lawyer holds on to it until you could file it in the registry, what they call the tabu, in order to make sure that he didn't sell it to 8 people. I know once did business with somebody, he sold the same apartment to 8 different people. I wasn't doing real estate with him, but people have not been known to do that. So depends on the time also. So what you say, the date's no good, the specific date is no good. How do you know it? Why is that good? Or that is good only if you have the specific date. It's still not time stamped. You know if it's in the morning, the evening. And it helps for the day before and the day after. It helps at least for the day before and the day after. So it helps for that. So any date will do. The Chum said you need a date. For those reasons that we said. The date doesn't have to be specific though, but it should be, as we know, Yud Gimel Sivan. Let's say he wrote it to have handy. And he's having a lot of fights with his wife. They're going through counseling and he says, I better have this get handy because looks like things are going downhill. He had the sofa here, the Adam here, say, let's see, put it in his pocket. If they make up and they kiss and make up, things will be okay. And he had his pocket and he had that for a long time. Now he gives it to her a year later. So what does the date help? Right? What does the date help? I mean, he divorced her, she could have committed adultery in between, and she has a get that was written before, right? She has a get that was written a year ago. She's gonna go, right? A person doesn't like to put punishment early. He doesn't like to prematurely put punishment. It's not a good thing to have a get handy. You might, get angry and just give it to her, and people don't like to do those kind of things and have a get around. That's usually not a normal thing. But Here's the case that does it. Rashi, getting a bum say, what about a get that comes from overseas? It took a long time to travel in those days by boat, right? The Mishnah was written in Nisan below Matla Tishrei. They didn't give it to us until 6 months later in Tishrei. What did the Chum's Takana help there? The date is predated. She's going to be able to claim that she was divorced earlier, when indeed she wasn't divorced till 6 months later. If she committed adultery in between, she'd get out of it. And also she's going to be able to claim Paris then when she's not entitled to the Paris till later on, according to the Chachamim. Amalei Hanu Kolislu. If they come from overseas, people hear about it and people investigate it. Rashi says, "Ubeilin is just being in Paris. Boila suya raya amos mata gitliada." In a case like that, where she's going to say, "Oh, I was divorced 6 months ago. Look at the date." Or I was divorced 6 months ago. I'm entitled to the Paris. People say, "Wait a minute. We know it came from overseas. It came from New York to Israel. It took 6 months to travel in those days. We want to see proof of when you got divorced." Then people will know. People hear about it and they want to have proof when you were divorced, and that's what they'll demand. They'll demand proof in that case in order to get out of it, because they'll know the date doesn't mean anything in that case and prove when you got divorced. All right. So this is not now the Gemara. Tomorrow's Gemara gets to the first question is like, when do you count? Like, there's 3 months hakana between marriages, no matter what the reason for a termination of a marriage, whether the husband died, divorced, whatever. She shouldn't get married for 3 months in order to know whose kid it is. When do you start counting from? The Gemara gets into that issue. Tomorrow's daf will be on the podcast as usual, and on Sunday we'll pick up from the Mishnah near the top of Yud Tes. Shabbat shalom l'kulam.
Shabbat shalom, regards everybody.
Okay.